would like to welcome everybody in this morning to the 2021 IUPAC Global Women's Breakfast panel discussion and networking session with the theme of empowering diversity in science. So my name is Dawn Friesen. I'm the 2021 chair for the Greater Houston section, and hosting the Zoom session is Yifan Dong from the Brazosport local section. So our two sections combined are happy to bring you this collaborative event this year. For those who haven't attended a previous Global Women's Breakfast or haven't been involved, this is essentially an initiative started by IUPAC. And this is the third year, so 2019 and 2020 really demonstrated to IUPAC that there is a need for building a network of people of all genders to address barriers and inequalities faced by women in science. And this year's theme is empowering diversity in science, as I said. So it's not just women, that applies to other marginalized identities as well. This event is being held 2 days before the United Nations Day of Women and Girls in Science. So February 11th, thank a women scientist or a girl scientist in your life. So we will start with the networking session, and then we will be moving on to the panel discussion at 8 o'clock. So here's the, I'm in the right window. Here's the agenda for today. So we will start off with a networking session, and as people come in, we will be adding people to breakout rooms. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for 2 sessions of networking of approximately 20 minutes apiece. And then we will take a short break, depending on when we come back from those breakout rooms, and we will be moving into the panel discussion. So we'll introduce the panel briefly. I have some questions that we have prepared for the panel, and then we will be opening the floor to questions from the audience as well. So, and then we'll be wrapping up with a few closing remarks and hopefully sending everyone off into their day with a renewed interest in moving forward with enhancing diversity in science. So, as I see, we have more people coming in. Those remarks took a lot faster than I thought. So we can either hang out here and chat a little bit, Yifan, or if you need a little bit more time to sort us into our breakout rooms as we come in.
Sounds good. I think it's probably a good idea to make sure we briefly introduce our panelists, making sure if they get into the same breakout room, they know who they're talking about. Maybe we can just point out to the 4 panelists, we can ask them to raise their hands so that everyone can just make sure they know who are the panelists they're going to be talking to.
Sure, I don't see, I'm not sure if I have Carolyn here. I will bump this ahead.
I think everyone, we have all the panelists are here.
Hi, Carolyn.
Oh, there you are. I'm sorry. I can't read names apparently. I think my brain was looking for a darker background on the Zoom call. I'm not sure why. Pattern matching. So Carolyn, can you clear me on pronouncing your last name?
Rebus.
Rebus. Thank you.
Or any way you want to say it. There's no wrong answer, Dawn.
Is this the call me what you want, just don't call me late for dinner? So yes, we do have all our panelists here with us today, so you can interact with them in our networking session. So we have Dr. Carolyn Rebus from Dow. We have Amber Hinkle from Cabestro.
Hi, everyone.
We have Dr. Javours Hollingsworth from the University of St. Thomas, who's in a very office space. Yep. And we have Carrie Spilker, retired from Chevron, joining us as well. And thank you very much for the reminder, Yifan.
Well, with that, I have a pre-assigned rooms ready to go down. Do you want me to just send everyone to the breakout room right now?
You might as well. We'll probably have people trickling in the next little while as well. So we can either catch them in the next round or you can send them in as they join.
All right, sounds good. I will be staying in the lobby just to handle in case we have latecomers. But right now, for those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, just follow the instruction on your screen. We are going to send you into a small breakout room so you can start networking and getting to know each other. And now to keep a time tracker. And we're going to get everyone in 5 seconds.
Thanks for coming, Lisa. Sorry you have to miss the panel.
Okay, I just saw the message from Lisa, and I think we also informed the panelists that the networking session will be recorded so that if people are having conflicts, they should be able to watch the panel discussion part at a later time. And since we are still 5 minutes before 8 o'clock, we can probably give everyone a 5-minute bio break, right? I see a lot of us are working on coffee. So, so we're gonna restart at 8 o'clock, and feel free to keep your video audio on. And if you want to turn it off, that's fine. We're going to start at 8 o'clock.
That's good. Good plan as everyone immediately makes a run for it.
Yep.
I think after, a year of this, any chance to like step away from the computer screen is seized immediately.
Very true. Camera off so everyone can stand up and stretch in the comfy pants you don't want to show on screen. I won't lie, I decided to run this from home this morning and go into work a bit later solely so I could wear comfortable pants.
Yeah, I'm in my yoga pants as well, and I bet a lot of people are.
I think everyone got a lot more sympathy this year for the running joke of the newscasters who were like sitting behind the news desk with just the business suit on top and like shorts or whatever on the bottom. And this is the, this last year, everyone has been like, yeah, no, we get that. Like basketball shorts or flannel pajama pants or whatever, fluffy bunny slippers.
Yep. And I think we've seen lots of our friends and colleagues' personal lives, right? I think I just saw a dog from Caitlin's screen, and you see your friends, colleagues study, their background. Sometimes you see their pajamas as well, right? It's a good way to get connected.
Yeah, I actually made the choice this semester teaching to not use a virtual background when I'm teaching, just because all my students pretty much are in their dorm or at home with their parents, and they have their life on display, right? So I felt it was only equitable to join with them on that ride, right?
It does get a little bit weird when you're in business meetings and people start commenting on what is that thing in the background that I can't quite see. It's like a piece of exercise equipment or some weird memorabilia you had from like back in grad school 20 years ago. And it's just like, could we just ignore that that's up on my wall right now?
That means they're not paying attention to the meeting is what that means.
I've got a couple of enamel pin banners, and I had a business manager who's like, what is that? It's a piece of fabric with pins on it. That's all it is.
Hey, change my background every month. I change the artwork on my wall. Not that I have that many pictures, but I move around. Just and some people notice. Some of my friends that I talk to routinely notice. And let's face it, that counts as excitement these days.
It's true. You're like, oh, I see your plant is growing very well.
So I think that the best experience we had is that one of the days that I was not at my facility, some of my employees went into my office and took pictures of themselves in my office. And so the next time we were in a virtual meeting, we all looked like we were in my office because they used that as the background for themselves as well. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
All right,
like
I put
that.
the hand raising instructions in the chat so folks have them.
Awesome.
Thanks, Hayley.
I have had the random experience of being on a call through Teams with another coworker and being like, oh, neat, she must have like moved to a different room. That plant looks really cool. Wait, that's the same plant I have in my background. Wait, we're both using the same Zoom background, like the same Teams background. I thought she must have moved to her upstairs room. That's a really nice plant. Wait, same plant as in my camera.
Well, we have one particular person on our team who I think spends every weekend looking for creative Teams backgrounds. And so we never know. Sometimes he's in a jail cell. Sometimes he has a big mound of toilet paper rolls behind him. Sometimes he's on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. So that's sort of in our daily production meetings, we're always waiting to see where he is.
I need to find an Enterprise one. That would be really cool.
They're pretty cool. I have a couple of them now.
I got the ACS publications ones, which are pretty nice. I don't think I can do them with this one. And I tried to have a contest with Carla's husband, a Zoom background, and his were way better, and he won. So I don't know if he's here today.
I don't think he's calling in. I think he has a conflict, but he enjoys doing really weird things. My favorite one that he has is a big giraffe head, like right
Yes.
over his shoulder.
I love that one.
I remember seeing that one during our awards banquet. Yes.
Yeah, I've tried to avoid anything. There are ones I would love. I've tried to avoid them in semi-professional meetings just because they can be distracting. But even for Teams, some of the default ones where it's just computer generated and there's like you're on a moon and there's a little Mars lander. Yeah. Even that will generate comments. But I think, as Carolyn said, anything to comment on because it's scenery you haven't seen. Not the same room that you've been staring at. All right, so Yifan, shall we get started? Or we wait a couple minutes for everyone else to come back yet?
I think the majority of the team should be back. They may choose to keep their cameras off, but I guess we can probably get started. We also have a couple people who did not participate in the networking session. I know several are having conflict, so they have to skip the networking session, but they are going to join us for the panel discussion. So maybe it's a good thing we can go over your agenda like down just once more. And Hayley has also put instruction for how to ask questions in the chat. We're going to also address the pre-submitted questions first. I'm going to be your timekeeper down from 8 o'clock to 8:30. We're going to address those first. And at 8:30, we're going to open the floors for everyone to go ahead and ask your question. You can ask it from the chat, and Hayley will be keeping an eye and directing those questions to John.
Oh, Zoom, why do you move everything all over the place all the time? So brought the slide up, as Yifan said. So we are at 8:01. We will get started. So for those who are just joining us, welcome to the IUPAC Greater Global Women's Breakfast for 2021. This is hosted jointly between the Brazosport and Greater Houston sections of the ACS. My name is Dawn Friesen. I am the 2021 chair for the Greater Houston section, and we are joined with Yifan Dong running the Zoom section from the Brazosport local section, as well as Hayley and Carla are here as well to help on the back end, and Hayley will be monitoring the questions. Yep. Kerry, noted. So hopefully everyone had the opportunity to take advantage of the Picture a Scientist screening that we offered over the weekend. I think it was an excellent opportunity and an excellent movie. And in line with the theme for this year's Global Women's Breakfast, which is Empowering Diversity in Science. We have a selection of panelists here, and I'm going to ask them some questions and then open this up to the floor. So I'd like to introduce our panel to everyone today. We have Dr. Carolyn Rebus. She is the Business Analytical Leader for Industrial Intermediates and Infrastructure at Dow Chemical. She has her Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from the University of Buffalo SUNY and her PhD from State University of Buffalo, New York at Buffalo. She joined Dow in 1989 and has worked in Louisiana, Texas, and Argentina, and is currently located in the Netherlands. And I'm not going to try and pronounce that because I will probably butcher the name of that city. She has co-chaired the IUPAC Award for Distinguished Women in Chemistry and Chemical Engineering, and has served on multiple ACS committees, including the Younger Chemists, Women Chemists, Sciences, and the uniquely named Committee on Committees. She was the Brazosport Local Section Counselor from 2006 to 2020, and was recently elected as a Director at Large. And she's been a member of the ACS since 1982. So Carolyn is with us today. We also have Dr. Amber Hinkle. Amber is the Vice President for Covestro with joint responsibilities as Plant Manager for the Covestro Channelview, Texas site, and for operations of the US-based joint venture with LyondellBasell. In 25 years, she has held a variety of roles in vitamin manufacturing, polymer manufacturing, and HSEQ. Her professional work has been recognized with a Women in Manufacturing STEP Award, as well as being featured in BIC Magazine's Profiles in Industry. Amber, as I can personally attest, has a passion for developing leaders, facilitating team building, and strategic planning. So she is past chair of the National ACS Women's Chems Committee and former Committee on Committees member. Currently the lead facilitator for ACS strategic planning workshops and a counselor for the Greater Houston section, as well as chair of the ACS Committee on Nominations and Elections. She is an ACS fellow and has been since 2012, and was the 2020 Swarm recipient of the Ian Nally Award for volunteer service to the ACS. So Amber, thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Javours Hollingsworth from the University of St. Thomas. He's an assistant professor there. So Javoris first realized his passion for chemistry in high school while doing summer research at Georgia College and State University as part of the ACS Project SEED program. He attended Georgia Southern University as a Gates Millennium Scholar, earning his Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry, and then continued to obtain his master's and doctorate degrees in chemistry from Louisiana State University. With support from the NSF, he went abroad to conduct research in Beijing, China as a international postdoctoral fellow, and then started his career as a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry at Florida A&M University. After completing that appointment, Javoris joined the faculty in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, and at UST, he now serves as the director of the Master of Science in Industrial and Process Chemistry program. Welcome, Javoris. And with us, last but not least, is Carrie Spilker, who is formerly a senior R&D manager at Chevron and is now hopefully enjoying retirement. So as I said, she was senior R&D manager for production chemistry for Chevron Energy Technology Company in Houston, responsible for Chevron's global production chemistry technology research and development to Chevron's operating companies worldwide, and just retired in the past year. Carrie earned her Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from Sam Houston State University, graduating with high honors in chemistry, and then began her career as a polymer chemist for Texas Eastman Formulating Plastics in Longview, Texas. She moved to Houston and then began a 30-year career at Chevron in technical and managerial positions with increasing responsibilities. Carrie was recognized for innovative contributions to energy conversion technologies with several inventions in the development of biofuels, distributed hydrogen, and chemical EOR. In her role as senior R&D manager for production chemistry, she led a team of scientists responsible for oil field chemistry for all Chevron upstream fields, delivering technical solutions for field development, reservoir management, and production operation assurance. So Carrie, thank you for joining as well. So as Yifan noted, I will be starting with a few preset questions, and I will offer them up specifically to some of our particular panelists, and then if another panelist would like to join in on that, we can go that way as well. So I will throw this up very quickly. So as I said, I hope everyone had the opportunity to look at the Picture a Scientist documentary and view that. And really what it covered is a lot of the challenges that women have faced in science over probably the history of science, let's be honest. So with that in mind, Amber, how do some of the experiences that were shared in the film compare to your experience in science?
Thank you, Dawn. So one thing I am fortunate to say is, you know, there was, especially Jane's story was very horrific, for lack of a better word, and I have not experienced anything like that. So I would say that, you know, my experiences are more on anything from, you know, when I was working shift work as a process chemist, the operators who were all men, thinking that I should be the one that cooked dinner for the shift. So fortunately, I was quite able at that point to tell them that I didn't cook and I'd be happy to eat. To in more recent years, I actually being the only technical woman on a site leadership team at a different site, it was determined by the plant manager that I needed to be best friends with another woman on his staff because I was a woman, and you know, having to kind of work through that scenario to say that's not really how that works, and you know, not something that I was going to spend time on. And if he had an employee he needed help with, that's a different thing to ask than to determine people should be friends because of their gender or whatever, right? So so, you know, it's a lot of little things along the way, but I would just say that for the most part, I think that some of those things come from how people interact with one another. So some of the things that you experience are not necessarily based on gender, perhaps, but just personal characteristics, right, from person to person. And of course, for me, one of my personal characteristics is that I am a woman. So.
It's true. Thank you. Javoris, in the film, Dr. Burks talked about how not just being a woman, but a Black woman in science impacted her experiences. And so there's a lot of intersectionality when it comes to, it's not just women in science, it's a lot of marginalized identities in science. So have you seen similar experiences basically in your life in science?
Yes, I definitely have on pretty much a lot of occasions. Some cases it wasn't so bad, but there's been some other cases where it was, I guess, kind of traumatic in a sense. I remember one of the times I was at Florida A&M University. While I was there, which is a historically Black university. So when I was going into that, my mindset was, you know, it should be a breeze. You know, I'm in an environment where it's, you know, other people will identify with, and no big issue. But that was the first moment where I kind of realized too that when people picture a scientist or a professor, I go completely against the grain on every front. Like most people think, you know, old white male when they think professor. Like, you know, I'm sure you all probably kind of get this vision in your head, right? And then if I say scientist, you probably think, oh, you know, glasses and lab coats and all this other stuff. But at that time, I was probably in my late 20s. You know, probably dropping hints of my age, but I was kind of probably around my late 20s at that point. But seeing me, I was this young Black guy, right? And I remember some Saturdays I would host tutoring sessions for the students who needed extra help. And there was the first time that I went, I remember, because I had keys to all the doors I could easily access, but I remember trying to open the door, and a security officer comes up and stopped me and say, what are you doing? You know, are you supposed to be here? So it was one of those moments where it's kind of like, yes, I'm supposed to be here. And I kind of had to pull out my ID and go through this whole process of showing that I work there, I'm a faculty member. But but yeah, that was one of those moments that kind of shook me up. Like even to this day, if I leave something on campus, especially if it's towards the night, I will not go back to get it just because of concerns related to how I may be perceived or, but yeah, there's a lot of moments. And then even on the academic side, trying to be accepted, I think that's a big piece. And as far as like the intersectionality with women and people of color, where, you know, there's some invisible barriers that you have to try to get over as far as being in certain circles or being part of the club. But yeah, seeing a lot of those moments in that video, it kind of brought back some memories of different instances.
Yeah, Dr. Burks talked exactly about that particular scenario, is parking in a faculty parking lot with a faculty tag as faculty, being asked what she was doing there. That's for faculty.
Yeah, and
so, yeah.
It was to the point too where I remember when I first started at University of St. Thomas, which is a Catholic university in Houston, to try to fit into this box, I would wear like suit and ties every day just so that I would be perceived as, you know, the role that I actually am in. So it was seeing some of the stuff that Dr. Burks talked about, it was kind of a reminder of that too, where many of my colleagues, you know, just to go back a little bit, I'm the only African-American in fact, in the sciences period at my university. So, you know, with seeing the interactions with my colleagues and how they're perceived versus myself, yeah, it's noticeable in some ways, but I don't think it's always a blatant thing. I think some things we've kind of, as the professor mentioned in the video, we've kind of have these things where we've kind of trained our thinking to where we have these certain implicit bias and whatnot, but just trying to counteract that. But now I've toned it down. I do feel more comfortable to where I don't feel the need to wear like suit and tie all the time just to prove, you know, prove myself to others. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the implicit bias portion of the documentary was something that was very interesting to me as well. Just how, like, you can think all you want, but your reactions are really what count in that moment.
And I just want to add in there, after watching the film, that's actually one of my favorite parts, Dr. Burks, when she was being questioned, this is a faculty parking lot, are you a faculty? I don't know you. And she reacted, and I don't know you, right? I think that's just something I like. I really enjoying that moment, having her confidence and being able to react and feeling really like, I'm not an imposter, this is where I belong. So I think that's a great reaction.
And she spoke to some of the same aspects you did, Javoris, just in terms of people expect you to dress a certain way. And there she is going, you know, I thought that too, but no, now I'm going to show up on an international documentary in a Wonder Woman shirt, in whatever shirt I want to, because people are going to think what they think. And if I'm going to show up, I'm going to be me all the way through, not dress up for that anymore.
Yes.
So speaking to some of these experiences, maybe Carolyn, you can touch on some of this. What are some of the ways that you suggest women scientists or engineers manage kind of the traumas, greater and smaller, from being treated poorly, and how they can thrive in this environment, even when it's maybe a bit oppressive?
So I hopefully it's how do we manage trauma? And I say I've been fortunate enough to never had a traumatic experience. The first thing you have to do is take care of yourself. So I think self-care is incredibly important, and it's going to be different for every person, right? Some people will achieve that by keeping it a secret for a long time, as we saw Dr. Willenbring in that movie did, right? She kept that silent for a very long time, the terrible experience she had. Other people will want to talk about it right away. Other people are comfortable reporting it. I think you have to be true to yourself and what makes you comfortable, but I do hope everybody would have some safe place where they would feel that they could talk about it and escalate it. I would say then at the other end of the spectrum, we have all those microaggressions, those little things that people say, and we all say them, that in some way or another make somebody else feel a little bit less than. So again, it's up to you. Do you brush them off? Do you learn from it? I will tell you that there was one favorite. Somebody told me something once, and the way I get back at them is just, I tell everybody this. I was told several years ago I was smart enough to be a man. That was meant to be a compliment. I didn't take it that way. But that's the way I handle that one, is I just let everybody know that's not the right thing to be saying to a woman. And I think we also then need to help make available resources to let people know behaviors we're going to accept and what we're not going to accept, what's allowable and what's not. And since we're on an ACS phone call, I will say ACS, I think, a pretty good job with that. So if you're ever at an ACS national meeting or participating in an ACS event, we have policies about harassment and about treating people with equity and respect. And so I think there are ways to put those things in place so we can all focus on what we care about and what connects us, which is the science.
Very
Dawn,
much agreed.
Dawn, maybe I can add just briefly as well. So I really second for sure what Carolyn says, that the most important thing is to take care of yourself as an individual first, right? Because only if you're really taking care of yourself can you think clearly to try to determine how to resolve an issue that might be going on, etc. And I think, you know, part of that is taking care of yourself professionally as well. And so just to piggyback on what Carolyn said about the ACS, you know, at various times in my career, I have felt undervalued in my day job, right? And I'm not linking that necessarily to being a woman, but just in general, we all go through experiences sometimes, you know, for whatever reason. And what I always found was quite helpful for myself was my participation in the ACS, where I have always felt valued. Right. So having that sort of volunteer experience, you know, something different you can do where you know that you're contributing and you know that it means something to people. And, you know, you sort of have your, it gets used too much, but for lack of a better phrase, sort of your safe place, right, to be a professional and to do things was very beneficial for me. And then I always felt refreshed when I went back to my day job and had, you know, additional confidence to take on whatever hurdles I needed to. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really an important thing is, I guess, and it has to be, or it's a tendency certainly in the sciences, we tie ourselves to our science, whether that means our job frequently, so very often. And so that's to find other outlets, whether through the ACS or outside of the career, but even within the career, that you have more than one outlet for demonstrating your professional competence for you and having a support network for you, rather than being necessarily tied to, as we were talking with Caitlin, finding out that, you know, having food and rent is important, but having a place where you're nurturing more than just the physical.
So we do
I'd
have
like to. Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I was just going to point out, we do have a question in the chat from Carrie that touches on some of the recent comments about taking care of yourself. And sometimes that involves waiting a long time to talk about events. So Carrie, do you want to bring up your question?
Oh, okay. So I thought about this, but and I have some thoughts on it, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say. Let me make one quick comment about what piggybacking on what Carolyn and Amber both said. I think the ACS was extremely helpful in allowing me to take on leadership roles and in a leadership position, whereas in my company, I did not have that role. I mean, I just wasn't a senior person, a lab leader, but I was able to chair the local ACS section, run meetings, learn how to run it, prepare agenda, get organized, organize people, lead, and I really want to just make a plug right here for the ACS Leadership Institute. I took every course they offered, and hone my skills through ACS. So that's my plug for ACS. On the question, my question was, what do you think about this Jane's 17-year gap from the time that she was brutalized to the time that she actually reported it? And I'm going to sit back and listen to your comments, and then I'll make my own.
So I'll throw this open to the rest of the panelists then. Someone wants to take point. Javoris?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because even during, we had the recent, the Me Too movement that, came in and got a lot of traction, because a lot of women who had experienced these moments where they were harassed and whatnot, they, held it in. And a lot of times people say, so why don't you just come out and say, what happened? But people don't realize that there's a lot that goes within that, especially when you think about some of the pressures. I think in the video, she was basically sexually harassed by, was it Crick or who? One of the big scientists, right? So you have this one piece where it's like, okay, if I do come out, will people believe me? Then you have this other piece, all right, how will this affect me and my career? Do I want to be perceived as that person? So I think a lot of times there's a lot that goes along as far as like trying to even just come to terms with what happened. And then it's a whole nother piece to even come out with it or come out about it.
And I think she wanted to make sure she felt safe and established in her career, because the terrible thing that somebody else did should not be setting her career back. So I don't want to judge her, but I can understand why you'd want to make sure that you had gotten tenure and you felt comfortable and perhaps even motivated, because now you have a daughter of your own, want something like that to happen to her. A corner of my brain thinks about, wow, that professor was probably doing that many years before she was a student and every year after she was his student. And how many other women did he do that to? I give her so much credit for speaking out about it and for making the change happen. But also feel bad for the other people who didn't get that protection fast enough.
And as Amy pointed out in the chat, his very first student, the one who wanted to be an astronaut so very, very badly, she felt the consequences of that. She went, this is not acceptable, and went to their department head or their dean or whoever it was, and they're like, well, he brings in the funding. So she ended up leaving with a master's degree, and it has permanently impacted her career, whereas his career was not impacted at all until much, much farther down the road. Kerry, did you want to come back in on that? You're on mute.
Okay, there. I'm sorry. I was clicking. It finally just said hit alternate A to unmute. I don't know why. Yeah. So I thought about that during the film. I was a little bit maybe angry, like why did it take her so long to come out and out this guy that was so egregious in her treatment. I mean, she didn't do it, but later in the film, they did a beautiful job of covering probably why she didn't. With the astronaut, the woman that wanted to be an astronaut, and she was pretty much told by another woman that she went to that, well, maybe you should just wrap up your master's and go on and someplace else to finish your career, because this guy brought in too much money. So I think timing. One of the things I was thinking about is timing. The way she timed her. She had time to process her feelings, and maybe she had actually gotten to the point where she just had put it so far in the background where she tried not to think about it anymore, but her daughter brought up these feelings. Could she have done it sooner? Probably, but it was at that point, and I think all of us have been angry at one time. We're like, we're going to just write that letter and then we just, our common sense takes over and says, okay, you really think about it, sleep on it before you write it, and think of a different way to express yourself. But sometimes there really isn't an avenue in corporations. I think it's more so now that we have opportunities to go and, bear our grievances, but I don't think she had a place to do it. And I think if she would have done it too soon, it would have damaged her career. But I really wish there was some other way that people that have had these things happen to them to get their story out. And I mean, I look at Nancy Hopkins and her experience. It took her a long time, and there wasn't really an avenue until she wrote that letter and handed it off to another. And then all of a sudden they realized how many people this was exactly their experience. And it would be almost, I'm thinking, a great thing for the ACS to have a safe space or some sort of committee where we could actually express some of these things that happen in chemistry at different places, so that it isn't put off for 17 years, or a common group that we could come and have people talk out some of these feelings that they're experiencing at work, and try to resolve some of these issues, not 17 years later, but more immediate, with the support of people that are in positions to help. So that's just my comment.
So, Kerry, this is Carolyn. I think it's always been worse than academic industry. And it's not because of people, but the difference, the power dynamic in academia is so different. When you are that graduate student or that postdoc, is one person who kind of hold your professional fate in their hands. And that's so different in industry. You're not going to have that much power in the hands of one person. I think of our companies right now understand what's acceptable and what's not, and work very hard to put mechanisms in place to give us places to talk to and ways to address that. Universities have that too. I don't know that they're as effective. There was an ACS council meeting a couple of years ago where we talked about harassment. And Amber, you may remember this. And they did ask if the members of the council, so there are about 440 people in the room, had you ever witnessed or experienced sexual harassment at an ACS meeting or an ACS event or in your professional workplace or learning environment? Of the women who were there, 77% said yes. And of the men who were there, 57% said no, said yes, I'm sorry. So the men either didn't recognize it or just were much less likely to see it. But even still, 57% of them were aware of cases. And I wonder, how can we let that be? How can we be doing something about that?
That speaks a little bit to, as Adam, so Dr. Willenbrand's witness, essentially, who saw everything that was going on. And had you asked him possibly before he was asked to provide a letter in support of that, he might have said, well, no, not really. But the minute someone called out and said, hey, you were there, I was experiencing this terrible thing. And he'd be like, yes, actually, that was terrible and shouldn't have happened. So some of it might just be recognizing that.
We do have a question for the panel, Kaylin. Do you want to vocalize your question?
Yes. So my question is, as a graduate student, I can say that we're still being told to wait, to not stir the pot until we have tenure, until we have protection and career established. And yet, as was pointed out by Dr. Burke, this barrage of implicit bias and microaggressions takes its toll. It affects our retention, it affects our mental health, and it leaves long-lasting scars on us. So my question is, shouldn't we now be standing on the shoulders of women like Jane, not just following in their path?
And why would you want to take a job at a university where you have to live in that kind of environment and put up with that on a daily basis? Or a company where you have to put up on a daily basis? How terrible that is.
Well, the other thing is, it's your right to, if you get hired into a position, it is your job. And I will say that I haven't experienced maybe the sexual harassment, but I have experienced bullying at work. And I've seen people bully. Men bully other men, women, whoever they can. Bullies bully whoever they can. And I've seen that firsthand at work. And I mean, I used to walk in the lab and someone had, headphones and it had my name on it, when I was, things like that, to be just mean. And you could laugh it off. Like Jane Willingbring was, she just laughed at, I didn't, I kind of have a temper. So I would, confront the person and ask them why did they think that was particularly funny. Or if I saw someone bullying another technician who was in a position of authority, and they were kind of verbally beaten up this person because they were, they really didn't do anything as far that I could tell, that I stood up for that person, even though I wasn't in a position of authority. But of course, it's like you said, Carolyn, it's not, I wasn't in academia. I don't know how it works there, but I know at my workplace, they don't really put up with that sort of, sort of thing of being a bully. And I will tell you, the two people that the one person I corrected became very good friends with the person they were bullying. I watched it for a couple of weeks, and I finally said, I can't stand this anymore. I don't know why he's being that difficult and making our, it wasn't only making the technician's life difficult, it was making mine too, because I felt guilty watching this go on. So I just, told him to stop. But I think someone had brought up, maybe Dawn, that they don't realize what they're doing. I think they do. I just think people allow them to get away with it in some sense. So I think one of the things is we see these aggressive acts or practical jokes. Some of the practical jokes were really not funny, the things that they would do to people. And I just didn't have I just said, look, there are safety issues in the lab. People have to know that that their equipment's going to work and that someone hasn't fooled with it. And I said, no practical jokes in the lab anymore. If I see it, there'll be consequences. So some of the things they thought were, really funny. I can't talk about the things that they would do. It was just awful. And they thought they were really clever and funny and smart, and they were practical jokes. But I just said, nope, we have safety issues and we're not doing that anymore. So a lot of the microaggressions, I don't know if that's microaggressions or the quote, the lab environment or, workers environment, but a lot of it is we have to step up and stop when we see things. And I think Carla was bringing up when she was talking about going to facilities, she enjoys going on site because she gets to see people's safety and best practices. And I thought that was a brilliant way of being able to talk to people and work with people, is congratulating them on their, proper, safety culture that they have. But it's just a culture in general, your diversity culture. It's a way when you go into a place and you see good diversity practices and cultural practices, safety practices. Those are all good things to congratulate people on. And I think that we should continue that. But also, if you see less than stellar safety best practices or diversity issues, I know some of the things that we've had happen with some of our female scientists is the LinkedIn, where they're, you know, where you find out that someone has predatory advances based on their LinkedIn account. I don't know if anybody's had that happen to them. It hadn't happened to me, but I know a couple of engineers that were contacted through their LinkedIn. So that's another issue. Or at work with, again, dress code, where someone comments about their dress, inappropriate things. So you could have a chance in that kind of culture to have private conversations with people that make those kind of remarks. So
what are we going to do about it? Right? I don't want to come out of this and have it be 2 hours of agreeing that there's terrible things. I'd love us all to talk about what are we going to do, what positive actions we can take. And it can be with respect to sexual harassment. It can be with respect to any of the different ways we have of showing lack of respect for people. I'm listening for ideas here.
well, again, like I had mentioned, that when you go into a place and you see good best practices that you should comment on it. Or if you see something, you really need to say something about some of these things that go on. And again, a lot has to do with whether your management is open. I could see where people would not say anything if they don't feel emboldened by their management. Our management was extremely encouraged openness and to have these kind of conversations. So I don't know. I think a lot has to do with management. It starts at the top, where you encourage your people to speak up and speak out when they see, again, just safety issues. We had a very strong culture of safety, and it's because people were allowed to make safety suggestions. It should be the same for diversity, that if you see something, you need to speak out on good practices and bad practices.
Yeah, something I want to add to that too is I know Carolyn had mentioned earlier how the differences in terms of the academic side of things and industrial side of, you know, in terms of the treatment that women or people or minorities may experience. But I think as far as like academia, we really do need to completely change the dynamics and culture. What I mean is, for instance, in graduate school, I have heard stories of young women who were in, you know, certain groups, and in that type of circumstance, you're in a very vulnerable state. What I mean is, the professor who you're working for, they literally dictate whether you receive your degree or not. We're talking about you dedicating 4 to 5 years to this one thing, this one achievement that you want. And this person, this single person, has complete control whether you reach that goal or not. So there's this sense of fear of, you know, if I say something, would this all have been in vain? I wasted my time. 2, if it's a prominent or distinguished professor that, you know, brings in a lot of money, you know, if I take this up to the dean or provost or whoever, will they do anything? Right. So I feel like one thing that really needs to happen is that when someone speaks up, action really needs to be taken. Like if there's this constant situation where people are reporting things, but, you know, the individuals who are doing these things are getting a slap on the wrist, is creating a scenario where people don't feel comfortable coming forth, because it's going to be like, okay, if I do, nothing's going to happen. And then on top of that, I still won't get my degree, or I still won't get tenure. Or so it starts with trying to actually act on these moments where people are speaking up, because 1, it takes a lot of bravery to even do it. So 2, I think we need to act on it and not just, you know, sweep things under the rug, and you know, be proactive.
So one of the things that's come up, and I don't know, maybe Amber, if you want to weigh in on this, get your chance to have your voice heard, is how do you deal with, I mean, a lot of it is it's the old white men syndrome in science and keeping a lot of this kind of quiet. How do you deal with it when, as in Dr. Willenbrand's case, it's another woman, a senior woman, who is willing to basically throw someone else under the bus, both whether it be for their prestige or for the prestige of the institution or the company, or just to hush things up? How do you have, are there ways that we can deal with that, keep them from amplifying that bias?
So I think, no matter who it is, right? I mean, maybe as a woman, you think it's particularly egregious if another woman isn't getting on the bandwagon, and similarly if you're part of a different group. But I think one thing that's important is how you approach it. And in the scenario in what I hope would work in academia as well. Now, this is if you're, really as like Javoris said, on the faculty, et cetera. But, what's the business case for the scenario, right? And I mean, talking about the positive things around having diversity of all kinds, right? The kinds you can see, the kinds that you can't see, people from different, backgrounds, parts of the world, what have you. Talking about that in a positive way is usually a first good step. A second step then is to talk about the lack of diversity in a negative way in terms of, I think publicizing things like the situation that happened at Boston University and this professor finally, losing his job, right? And, the poor publicity at the university. So, sort of then that negative, hey, if we don't make sure that these things can't happen at our facility, at our institution, we could be, we could have bad publicity. We could be liable for some of these things, right? So, and then finally, if someone is really being pervasive about it, it's such a personal matter, then I think you have to directly talk to them on a personal basis, right? But we have to make sure that we use emotional intelligence in that. And I think that's why sometimes it is very difficult to say something at the time something is happening, because you're emotional, right? You're under stress. Whatever you say, right, may not be as impactful as if you're able to kind of take the emotions out of it and really approach it from, more of a data standpoint and just being calm yourself, not letting it affect you. And that is extremely difficult if you're the person that's in the situation. One of the things that I would recommend as individuals is this is why it is so important to have your network and make sure that you're not isolated. Even as a student, even very early in the process, talk to other students of all kinds of backgrounds. I mean, my experience is if someone is acting disrespectful to one person, they're doing it to others, and not necessarily others of all the same group, let's say, right? So talking to people, it's maybe easier to say something if there are 2 or 3 of you that can say, here are some facts about what has happened that is not correct, right? That this is not the way people should be treated, and here's why. So it's not, really oftentimes people perceive some things maybe as just whining, or I hate the phrase gets used a lot, personality conflict, right?
And not a good fit.
Yeah, you have to get away from those, and it is better to have that network and have additional people to support you in that as well.
And I think that's why Nancy Hopkins at MIT and her team was so successful early on.
Yes.
And I remember you made too when that report came out, because what did they do? They went with their tape measures and they got data. And then that was not about somebody's feelings, which could have been discarded. It was about data, and everybody was able to say, and the president of MIT said, wow, okay, I get this. This is a problem for us. So I like your suggestion, Amber, about pulling up the facts, and the rest of us can bring legitimacy by sharing that kind of information that supports that all these things are prevalent. Yeah.
And I would say one thing to that is it came up in the discussion that one of the reasons MIT took that seriously was that women were starting to turn down job offers because that was out there. And to Carrie's point, that if you can go at it both ways, is if you are a department or a university that is known to take these sort of things very seriously, to treat them seriously and to deal with them, you could become a very attractive place to be for people who want to build themselves up strongly. Misty, you had a question. I want to make sure we don't miss that.
Hi. Yeah, so I had a couple of things to say. First of all, I kind of feel like I'm a nobody because I'm a college student, but I'm 42. And when I saw this film, which I haven't had a chance to finish it yet because I'm also taking care of my son, which I took the semester off because I had to do that. I actually started school 20 years ago and was told by a chemistry teacher that I was not smart enough to be in the science field. And so I went in a different direction, ended up even in the military, and came back. I'm here and I am smart enough. I have to go at it a different way and I'm figuring it out. But what I am hearing a lot in this is how are these victims going to protect themselves? How are these victims going to do something? And I think that we've seen throughout history in every area where people are oppressed or marginalized, that without some kind of legislation and accountability, nothing changes. And people having to protect themselves as an individual through their trauma and having to, well, get your mind right and then go in and fix the problem. That it doesn't change anything. It doesn't make it better for those of us who are here still trying to, get in the game. And so some of the things that I was thinking about is ways to be proactive is a great unlearn. First of all, is re-educating everyone that's in the field now. It has to be an emphasis. Providing protection is important for the individual, obviously, but then also having accountability and some kind of things put in place, and that only happens through some kind of legislation. And there are groups out there like the NAACP who are really great at doing just this, and there needs to be a crossover where it says, how did you guys put these in place? What are some systems that we can be doing to be proactive at getting at? And when we're talking about things like safety briefings that we all know, we all do it all of the time, we could be including things like, well, I wrote it down. I have these are my notes, y'all. You guys know what notes look like. But it's things like inclusion, unlearning, accountability. These kinds of things could be part of the safety briefings that we're doing at a regular basis. And then things like what are actions that people can be taking. And I think for ACS as a group, and I'm really new, like I don't know anything about this. I just want to be in this world, but what can be done are like resources. What resources is ACS providing? Is it front and center? Is there a page where if this is happening to you, this is what you can do? You can go and grab this, and having that, so that we can get to that stuff really easily. And then even so that we could take that to our schools and be saying, hey, you guys need to be doing this. These are the rules that you need to be following, and having that. And then, yeah, we just need to be creating environments where this kind of stuff is absolutely unacceptable. Like we need to root it out. And if the people aren't willing, the crotchety people aren't willing to like get on the bandwagon, then they need to just sayonara, dude, see you later. You just can't, this isn't okay anymore. So yeah, so with that, my question is, what resources do we have?
So I think Carolyn was nodding her head vigorously because ACS does have a lot of great resources. Carolyn, do you want to?
Yeah, and I wish I could get to them. So I think there are a lot of great resources, especially on inclusion. Not only printed information on the web, but there's been some amazing ACS webinars this year. And if you're an ACS member, those are available to you on demand. You could probably also get local sections to figure out how to show some of them and discuss them. There's been a number of discussion groups and other things that I see happening all the time. But mostly I was nodding, Misty, because I think what you started out by saying, I'm nobody. And I want you to take those words back, because what I also heard you say, I believe you said you're a veteran. Wow. You're a mom who's gone back to school, which just shows an incredible dedication to education. What a role model you are with that. And then you just made a really great speech. So I think we're all just very busy being impressed by that. So you are definitely the type of person who stands up, but if there's anything we can do to help you, you let us know, okay?
Thank you.
And to echo the quotes that were in the chat, you are absolutely capable of being a scientist. So don't ever doubt that. So, and Carolyn, you will be provide Yifan or myself the resources that you were not able to access. So we'll make sure everyone gets a hold of those.
Yeah, we will try and find some great things, including some wonderful article a couple years ago in Chemical and Engineering News. I think there's some good resources there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't have to be the whisper network that's protecting people. There needs to be a lot stronger. And I think that goes to some of the things that we were talking about, the differences between academia and industry, is that at least in the workplace, there are some protections, legal, whether they're functional and actually effective or not is another story. But at least there is something on the books, whereas in universities, that power network tends to be much more nebulous. And especially with students being employees or not employees, depending on how that tends to benefit the institution, they don't have the benefit of a lot of the worker protections that exist, effective or not.
And I think, again, there's a lot of good information out there, and especially in the last couple of years, there's been a resurgence. Again, it sort of goes in cycles again around the positives of being inclusive and in really having a diverse team working on things and supporting diversity, and the negatives of not doing those things. And, you know, the articles are out there in terms of, hey, so if someone in your lab puts up strange cartoons that are offensive on the bulletin board, well, why don't you just pin up an article about, you know, some of these things that have happened where that wasn't acceptable, right? I mean, it can be that subtle, perhaps, to try to get the message across in a lot of fashions.
Christy, did you want to jump in here? We'll have this be the last question.
Oh, I just put it in the chat. I mean, Carolyn had asked before about some potential ideas for changing things, right? And I know that we have to go through ACS accreditation under Rice, right? Every whatever, they review it all the time, that we are an ACS certified department. And diversity, equity, and inclusion could be added as part of that. I mean, it's a big hoo-ha to do something like that. But what could ACS do to support, aside from providing resources, right? They could say, well, we're not going to certify your department unless you meet certain standards, whether it's, you know, and this gets back to the quantification, the metrics, like the MIT study that actually looked at that there was bias, right? So if the department is addressing that as a whole, because it is, as you said, harder in academics, I think, than in industry, because the HR is just a non-existent thing. Yeah, so that's just an idea of something that ACS, you know, could proactively look into, right? If they want to say this is something that's important to us as chemists. Yeah,
Thanks.
one thing that really struck me, about the movie was this. There's a lot of focus, and we talked about it a lot here today, with the egregious examples of sexual harassment. But it's the non-egregious, they said, as the tip of the iceberg, right? 10% are the jerk that everybody knows is a jerk because of what they're doing. And 90% is the somebody telling you that you're smart enough to be a man. And then that's the harder stuff, or the, the people wondering, if you belong in this building, right? Because you don't look like everyone else. That's the stuff that's really hard, but is the more pervasive. And that it's, how do you do that? I think Misty's idea of a great unlearning is awesome, but I don't know how that actually happens, right? Like realistically. So I don't know. Right. Requiring some sort of metrics of outcomes of like, well, at least they're not doing this, but which we can measure as being biased, is a start.
And a lot of that comes down to consequences for actions.
Yeah.
Which is, if you're going to make a "you're smart enough to be a man" comment and someone is actually saying, yeah, that's not funny, that's not a compliment, and if I hear that again, there's an outcome that is very unpleasant for you, not for the person that you were trying to throw that at.
So one thing I've found very effective as well, just in, working at a chemical plant in Texas for a long time now, and mostly working with men over that career, there'll be various comments, and everyone has a mother for sure. They might not have a wife and they might have a daughter. But, just sort of saying, hey, is that a comment that you would like someone to make to your mom? Right? Really just, it really makes people step back and think. So, I mean, it didn't work with everybody, but just something like that, helping people to realize that maybe you don't see me as your equal or peer in this environment, but we have a commonality, right? You have women in your life and you probably wouldn't want them to be treated poorly. So.
Javoris, I'll give you the last comment on this. It looked like you were going to speak, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna, I think she was saying something about the different microaggressions and whatnot. And I know we've mostly been talking about the structures where people from higher up have had their powers over the younger people and have said, whatnot. But there's also been moments where, and I think, who was it? I think it was Misty that was saying how we just need to start an unlearning process. I remember my first year at University of St. Thomas, I went in super prepared, eager and excited about starting my career there. And I remember that first semester, a student had came to me and was like, man, I really love your class. It's been a great experience. They really did a good job of hiring you for the quota or the diversity hire. Yeah, and I was like, it just really shook me up, because it's like, wow, all of the years that I've dedicated to get to this point, all of the accomplishments, and that just from that one statement, it just wiped it all away. So this is just from the perspective of someone as a minority, but I can't imagine as a woman the magnitude of having these type of microaggressions where people are giving you compliments, but at the same time it's a very backhanded statement that really diminishes you and your own perspective of yourself. But yeah, that was one of those things that really stuck with me. But I took that moment to educate the person, like, hey, I did reach this point on my own merit. Like, it wasn't given to me. So then just kind of having to have these conversations, I know it's uncomfortable, but just trying to educate one person at a time, and hopefully it spreads, hopefully.
Yeah, it's the usual, whether it be a woman or a minority or anything, you have to be 10 times as competent as the next available white man to be seen as equals, essentially. And on that happy note, I would like to thank everyone for joining us. So on behalf of the Brazosport and Greater Houston sections, thank you to Brazosport for partnering with us on this collaboration and bringing it to our attention, especially Yifan and Hayley and Carla for handling the technical end and monitoring the chat as well. Sam Miles at Roco Films for handling the logistics of the Picture a Scientist documentary screening. Special thank you to our panelists who I think have brought a lot of great perspective on this, and absolutely to all of our participants today who shared their experiences and their ideas. This was a wonderful discussion. So hopefully you can carry this discussion with you out into the world and continue to make science a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive place for everyone. So thank you all for joining us today, and we will be contacting you with additional information on where to access the recording and additional resources. Thanks again.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks, Yifan.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.